Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. So we're continuing on with the explanation for the Believer's Handbook for Seeking Knowledge. And inshallah, we're going to pick up where we left off a very long time ago. Inshallah, we're going to pick up from phase 7, inshallah, from the learning of the Arabic language. So we got phase 7, we got phase 8, and we got phase 9. And inshallah, then after that, we'll have completed all the chapters on learning the Arabic language. And after that, inshallah, we're going to continue on in the book and inshallah finish up the rest with chapter 7 is actually memorizing the Quran. And we'll probably kind of go through that a little bit faster because I wrote an entire book on that, and I'm doing I'm actually explaining that book on my channel, and we're pretty much close to the end, finishing the lessons on that book. So that would be kind of like a revision. But obviously, if anybody want a detail as far as that chapter is concerned, you can go listen to those lessons for the Believer's Handbook for Quran memorization, inshallah. But inshallah, right now, let's focus on this. So we're on phase 7, which is on page 105. And this is going to be dealing now with getting into the science of a sarf. All right, a sarf, which is a sarf is referring to what it means here is a morphology. Now, morphology, obviously, in the Arabic language is not exactly what it means in the English language. Morphology is dealing with how the word changes. Like when you're studying nahu, you're dealing with the i'rab, which the i'rab is the ahwal, the state of the last haraka of each kalima, whether it's ism, whether it's a fi'l, whether it's harf, and how it changes. Obviously, the huruf, they're mabani, so they're not going to change. But the ism, the asma, they change. The asma that are mu'raba. So that's what Nahu was focusing on, the changing of the state of the last part of the word. So from kitabun to kitaban to kitabin, and what causes that change in the sentence. But with sarf, you're focusing on how the word changes from, for example, like a fi'l to a ism fa'il to a ism maf'ul to a masdar, and the changing of the words in this regards. So what sarf does is going to actually increase your vocabulary tenfold. Once you understand how it works, and that's why I told you from the very beginning, when you start to learn the Arabic language, that you should at least get some basic understanding of sarf and how the words change, because that right there would just completely cause a huge jump in the amount of words that you know and you recognize. See, some of the words you might not know, you don't use them in your speech, but you can recognize them when you read a book because you have that basic knowledge of sarf. When you read the word, you know what it means. Or you can kind of get an idea. Because sometimes the word, even though it comes from a certain asl, it doesn't mean exactly what that asl means. But through the context and the understanding of the asl of the word, you can use those contextual clues, and with the knowledge that you have of the original meaning of the word, and you can find out what it means like that. But without this knowledge of sarf, you're not going to be able to do that. Every single word is going to seem like a new word to you. And then that's not how it works. So you have the word darasa, yadrusu, and you have dirasatan. Dirasatan is the masdar. And then you have the person that studies is a daris, like a daris, who a darisu shay, which we don't really use that a lot. We generally use talib, but you can use that as a ism fa'il. And then you have a dars, so you have alima, alim, shan ma'loom, ilm. So all of these words you see, when you see them, you're going to know them based off of your understanding of sarf. So when you see the word, for example, shan ma'loom, you understand what it means because it's a ism maf'ul from what? From alima. Alima means to know. So shan ma'loom is shan that is known. And a person that's an alim is a person who knows. And the ilm is knowledge, because it's something that you need to know, something that you have to learn and know. So like that, with the learning the sarf, you'll get that. But you need to have at least some type of basic understanding from the very beginning. But if not, well, now's your chance to get it. This chapter is really mainly for the person who already has that basic understanding, and now he's just trying to really, get stronger knowledge. Like, just to basically finish the science up, because this science is not something that requires a lot of research and study. In fact, the research and studying that you're going to be doing as far as the Arabic language is going to be number one in Nahu. That's going to be where you're going to work the most. The second thing is just looking up words and understanding the meanings of words. Going back to al-ma'ani, which is a science from the sciences of al-balagha, because balagha is three sciences. But that's what we're going to go through that, inshallah. In let me see which phase that's going to be. Yeah, phase 8. We're going to start going through like poetry and stuff like that. So phase 8, phase 9. So I'll hold off on that until, inshallah, until we get to that phase. So phase 7, inshallah. In this phase, you will begin studying sarf as an actual science. When you were studying ta'bir, you were introduced to some aspects of sarf, which are the basics, the foundational knowledge. But now you will study it in full. Sarf is much easier than Nahu to study, and it should not take a lot of time. It shouldn't. I mean, really, 6 months to a year. I mean, a year is really a long time just to spend on sarf. But you can take a year of revising Nahu and study sarf in that year, because it's a lot easier. It doesn't take up that much brain power. Or heart power, we should say, because your understanding is in the heart, not in the brain. But yeah, I mean, you could like you use a year to revise Nahu, and while you're revising Nahu, you can go ahead and just take sarf, study sarf in that time. And a year, but like I said, if you're using a year to revise Nahu, then you're going to do that anyway. So using that year also to include sarf, alhamdulillah, that's sufficient. So study it, and it should not take a lot of time. You have different ways that you can approach your studies of sarf, and they are the following. These are not the only two ways. These are just the two. And in fact, I wouldn't even say that these are the common approaches. These are just my suggestions. You follow, like, for example, if you're studying in a certain place, in the end, you're going to do whatever they do in that place. If you're in Mauritania, you're going to study the books that they study in Mauritania. If you're studying in Yemen, you're going to study whatever they study in Yemen. And trust me, not everybody studies the same thing, but we all get to the same destination. We're all trying to move towards the same destination. So in the end, you're going to see that the understanding is the same, inshallah. As far as these sciences are concerned, obviously not everything. Not when we're dealing with issues in fiqh, obviously, because in Mauritania they're Malikis. Yemen, they take the fiqh from the Sunnah. So obviously that's not going to be the case. But in these types of sciences like Nahu, Sarf, we're all going to get to the same ending, inshallah. Hopefully that's the goal. So there are other approaches, but like I said, this is just based on my knowledge, my experience, and what I saw was like the best in my opinion, which might not be the best for you, but hey, we'll try. All right, so the first approach is, so number one, you can memorize Laamiyah al-Af'al by Muhammad ibn Malik. It is a small poem consisting of a little over 100 lines, and the first time you read it, your tongue will stop working. It's very difficult. It's not an easy poem to read, to memorize. You really have to read it a lot. It's going to be like gymnastics for your tongue in the beginning, because he's going to give you examples of words that you'll probably never use in the Arabic language. But he has to do it because he's giving you examples of the ozan, the scales and the meters that you're going to have to know to understand all of these scales of sarf. So there are going to be a lot of words that you are not going to be familiar with, and they're probably going to mess you up trying to read it. The very first time, I wrote it here, like I wrote it in this book, as we're going to read right now. I literally took the metin and threw it across the room the first time I read it. Probably not the first time I read it, probably the first 5, 6, 10 times I read it. I just threw it. I couldn't, it angered me so much. So just to give you an example, if you have Laamiyah al-Af'al available to you, so you can go to Bab Abaniyat al-Fi'li al-Mazidi fihi. So it's talking about where all the extra letters are added to it. So he said, كَأَعْلَمَ الْفِعْلُ يَأْتِي بِزِيَادَةِ مَعَهُ وَإِلَّا وَوَلَّ استقام احرنجم انفصل وفعل ذا ألف في الحشو رابعة وعاريا وكذا اهبيج اعتدل تدحرجت عضيطة أحلولة استيطر See, I'm like, because I haven't read this in a long time. إيش يطر توالى مع تولي وخلبس سنبس اتصل وحبنطأ وانصل استلنقى تمسك تمسكن obviously so you see like سلقى قلنست جوربت حرولت مرتحلة زحزقت هلقمت رحمست اكوأل ترحشفت اجفأض اسلحم قطر سبحان الله اسلحم قطرنا الجمل ترمست كالتبت جلمط وغلمس ثم لمس اهرمعت وعلنكس انتخل وعلوط اعثوججت بيطرة سنبل زملق أضم من تسلق واجتنب خلل. So that's just one bab. And the whole, to be fair, the whole entire metin is not that difficult. That one, that's right there. That's where I just threw the book. I just could and that's right at the beginning. So if you go back and you read the rest of it, it's really not that difficult. If you go to for example, Bab Abiniyat al-Asma' al-Fa'ilin wa Maf'ulin, and they're just going to give you the اسم فاعل اسم مفعول from each wazn كوزن فاعل اسم فاعل جعل من الثلاثي الذي ما وزنه فعل ومنه صيغة كسهل وظريف وقد يكون أفعل أو فعالا أو فعل وكالفرات وعفر وحصور وغمر عاقر جنب ومشبه ثمل. So this is very basic stuff. It's just that one chapter is going to really, and then you got some more. It's not the only time, but out of I think it's about 113 lines, if I'm not mistaken. Because the copy that I have right here doesn't have the numbering of the line. I have to go in and write the numbers. But it's not as bad as it really seems. And once you read it a lot, I haven't read it in a long time, so that's why. That's why it's been a long time since I read Laamiyah al-Af'al. So, but that's the reason why you see. But if you read it a lot, you'll start to pick it up. It'll start to get easier and easier as you read it. If you follow the same pattern, if you've been listening to the lessons that I've been doing on the memorization of the Quran, and you follow that same type of pattern. So, for example, if I wanted to memorize Laamiyah al-Af'al, right now, what I would do is I would take the metin, I would read it one time. From the beginning to the end, and I would time it. I would literally sit there with my watch or the clock on the phone, and I would see how long it takes to read the entire metin, which it doesn't take long. It's going to take longer in the beginning because you'll be struggling, but once you start to read it faster, it's probably going to take 10, 11 minutes, if I remember correctly. I'll have to do it again. I have to read it again and time it, inshallah, because like I said, it's been a long time. I haven't had access to it. I just now got this book that had Laamiyah al-Af'al in it. So now I can actually sit down and read it again. But it's been so long since because it's a very difficult metin to find a good copy of. Any copy of, really. People just, and most of the times, in Sardiya and Yemen, people just don't memorize it. It's just not common. It's common amongst the people of Mauritania, and West Africa. They memorize. They all the children memorize this method, and they study. So it's very common. But in the Jazirat al-Arab, it's not very. I wouldn't say people. People memorize it, but it's not common. Every student of knowledge. You go to every student of knowledge and he's memorize it. Nah, it's not on the level of Al-Ajurumiyah. That's for sure. So it's very hard to find a good copy of it. So I haven't had a copy of it for a long time. Alhamdulillah, I got this. It's a different matun. I bought this book mainly because it has the mu'allaqat at the end of the book, the mu'allaqat al-sab'a, not the ashara. But it also has these other matun and nahu and sarf and balagha. So it's a whole collection. So alhamdulillah. But that's what you gotta do, man. You just got to read it a lot. If you read it every day, by the time you get it to about 12 minutes, 11 minutes, and you just read it every day as you're memorizing it. And if you're having trouble on certain chapters, skip them. Go to the easier chapters and memorize them. Like the chapter I read about the ism fa'il and the ism maf'ul, that's easy. You just take the easier chapters, memorize them, and you can come back to the harder chapters. You don't have to memorize it in the way, in order, because whatever you're having difficulty on, skip it. But inshallah, let's get back to this. So I said, I said the first time I read Laamiyah, I literally threw the metin across the room because I was so angry. The only thing is that Laamiyah is not sufficient alone. And if you memorize Laamiyah, because it doesn't cover all the chapters of Sarf, that's another thing. That's one thing. So I said the only thing is that Laamiyah is not sufficient alone. And if you memorize Laamiyah, you will have to memorize the chapters of Sarf from Alfiyah to complete what you read. If you memorize those two together, like you memorize Laamiyah to Laf'al, obviously you're going to memorize that first. But if you memorize and you've gone that path of Laamiyah to Laf'al, then you're going to have to go the path of what? Of Alfiyah ibn Malik. Because that's the chapters on Sarf and Alfiyah coupled with Laamiyah to Laf'al, you complete, inshallah, everything that you need. Everything that you need. I mean, obviously there's going to be more stuff, but I mean, again, it's what you need. We don't need to deal with all this uncommons. As a student of knowledge, you get what you need. You're not trying to become like Mr. Super Sarf Sheikh. You know, you got what you need. You got the basics. You can teach them to the people. Khalas, keep it moving. Get what you need. And every single science, you get what you need until you, because these are the ulum al-ala. And the ulum al-ala, you don't want to spend your whole life trying to perfect this science, and you get what you need and you keep it moving. You know, because what you're trying to get to is you're trying to get to like where you're really gonna spend a lot of time is in the science of fiqh, the science of going through books of hadith and the explanations of hadith, and the science of tafsir. That's where you really want to spend your life. All of these sciences that you learn, mustalah hadith, nahu, sarf, al-fara'id, usul al-fiqh, all of these are sciences that get you to the understanding to now where you could pick up Tafsir ibn Kathir, Tafsir ibn Jarir, you could pick up Fath al-Bari, you could pick up the Majmu'at al-Fatawa, Shaykh al-Islam, Majmu' al-Fatawa, the Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, and you could pick these books up and you could read them. You know, and you have the understanding because you've studied these sciences. So you don't want to spend your whole life on them. So if you do memorize Laamiyah al-Af'al, then you're going on the path of going towards what? Alfiyat ibn Malik. So I said if you, the only thing is that Laamiyah is not sufficient alone. And if you memorize from Laamiyah, you will have to memorize the chapters of Sarf from Alfiyah to complete what you need. If you plan to memorize Alfiyah, that is the way to go for you. And this is what you want. And this is the way they do it in Mauritania. And it works for them. And it's worked for them for hundreds of years. It's worked for them as long as we've known, like as long as they've recorded the history of what they've studied. This has been what they've been studying since the books were written, you know. So it could be because obviously Mauritania was connected. You see the close proximity to Al-Andalus, and they took the books from Muhammad ibn Malik, Imam Nahu. That's where he was at. So they took the books from that area, and then that's what they studied. You know, that's what they studied. So. You see that a lot of their curriculum basically is that old school curriculum from back in those days. You know that curriculum from the latter days of Andalus. So, Allah musta'an. All right, and the second plan is if you do not plan on memorizing Alfiyah and you want one metin to give you what you need to get started, memorize Tasreef al-Uzzi. This metin covers all the issues that you are going to need without going into unnecessary detail. It is short, but not too short. On a normal day, I can read the entire metin in about 45 minutes. That should give you an idea. That is the equivalent of 1.5 parts from the Quran. Tasreef al-Uzzi is a very good metin. I love it. I actually found it by accident at a book fair in Saudi. I was at the book fair. I believe it was in Saudi. Could have been the book fair in Yemen, but I'm not sure. It's been a long time. But they had some books that were in print from these companies that were printing these books from Maghrib, from these matun. And I saw it and I bought it. I bought the metin and I bought the sharh. And then I liked the metin so much that I went out and I found other copies of it and bought it. Like as many, like I think I bought like 3 or 4 copies of it because I liked it so much. Obviously, that goes to the fact that my focus was always on Mutammimah al-Ajurumiyah. I was studying Ibn Aqil when the war started in Yemen in 2015, 2014 to 2015, because the war with the Houthis started in Sana'a, and then obviously in March of the next year, and at the end of March, then the war started with Saudi Arabia. So but that's when I was studying Ibn Aqil. So I didn't get to finish it, but that's what I was studying. But during that time, I was introduced to Mutamima, and I fell in love with the book. So when I left Yemen and went to Saudiya, that was where my focus was. My focus was I switched the whole entire focus over just to studying Mutamima because I felt like that was sufficient. That was enough. If I memorized, I said, okay, if I memorize Mutamima, I can read. And at the time I was memorizing Mutamima when I first went to Saudiya, but I wasn't memorizing it completely. I was just memorizing all the chapters that I had problems with. When I was studying Ibn Aqil, there was just certain chapters that was just like used to bust my head open. So I would memorize those chapters in Mutamima because it was clearer for me. And then so Allah Mustaan, that's what I spent my time doing. And I sat down and I read all the books. So I read, like, for example, the Sharh of Alfiya li Sheikh Al-Uthaymeen. I read the Sharh of Qatr al-Nada li Ibn Hisham. I read the Sharh of Shudur al-Dhahab, also li Ibn Hisham. So I was just reading books. I read the different shuruh of Mutammima. So whatever, like, basically just I was using that as the basis, and then I was just reading all these other shuruh, and I found that my understanding had improved greatly. Improved greatly. So for that reason, that's why I continue just to focus on that and switch my focus. At the time, I was memorizing Alfiya during that war, but then when I noticed like I just wasn't understanding it the way I should have understood it, and that's when I switched over. So, being that I switched over to Mutammima, I needed a book in Sarf to make up for what I'm not going to get in Alfiya, because, like I told you, the last chapters in Alfiya are the chapters on Sarf. So I was like, okay, what can I do to solve this problem? And that's when I found this matan Tasreef al-Uzi at the book fair. Yeah, that was in Saudiya then. Yeah, definitely in Saudiya. That was not in Yemen. That was in Saudiya. That was in Riyadh when I went to the book fair there. So I found that, and that became the focus as far as Sarf was concerned. That became and I think I have like one copy of it left with me. So it's very rare. I mean, the copies are available. You can find a PDF of it online. So I mean, it's not like it's not available, but to find it in the bookstores might be a little bit difficult. When you do find it, just make sure you buy it. No, don't waste no time. So that's basically where that came from. So I said, this method covers all the issues that you're going to need without any going into unnecessary detail. It is short, but not too short. All right, so I read all that. So yeah, it's a very easy method. It's very easy to understand. I mean, even if you have the basics of Sarf, I mean, you can understand the method even without an explanation. That's how easy it is. Having an explanation obviously is still better. Studying it with a teacher, even better. But yeah, I mean, if you have a good understanding of Sarf, you'll pretty much understand the book which is like the opposite of Laamiyah al-Af'al. Laamiyah al-Af'al, you have to have a teacher. You have to have a teacher in the beginning, unless your knowledge of Sarf is just that to that point where you understand it. And then I said, again, Sarf is not something you want to spend more time on than is needed. So memorize one method and keep it moving. For me, the best path is the second path. The glamour and prestige are in following the first path, but again, you are not after prestige. And that's that a lot of people, they follow that path of Laamiyah al-Af'al and Alfiyat ibn Malik because that's prestigious. If you memorize the Quran and then you could say, I memorized the Quran and I memorized Alfiyat ibn Malik, it's a status symbol, if you say I memorized Mutammimat al-Ajrumiyya, people are going to just say, what's that? But like I said, for me, I was focused on what helped me understand. I could care less about all this status symbol. If I had a hard time understanding Alfiya, why would I memorize it? Memorize it for what? So I can say I memorized Alfiya. I can memorize it, but does that mean I can understand it and teach it? So nah. I mean, for me, the easiest thing for me and what I felt that I needed at the time, and I still have that feeling, was Mutammima. Mutammima was sufficient for me as far as memorization. It covered everything that needed to be covered, and it kept it very simple. All the extra stuff I can go into the books and memorize the extra stuff. I don't, but to sit there and maintain Alfiya for the rest of my life, you have to constantly revise it. Even if you revise the metin, but you didn't revise the shurur, you didn't go back and you're gonna forget so much information. Whereas Mutammima, everything's laid out. So that's for me. So I found the Tasreef al-Uzi because of that, of like I have Mutamima, I have Tasreef al-Uzi, khalas, is kafa. That's sufficient for me. If you took the path of memorizing Tasreef al-Uzi, find a teacher and a good explanation and get to work. By now you know the routine. The routine does not change. Once you have finished studying Tasreef al-Uzi, you should read as many books as you can on Sarf. I do not want to list specific books here like I will do, inshallah, for the other sciences because books of Sarf are not commonly available. Sarf is not a science that most people read about, so you will have to search for books on the subject. Radi' al-Din, he has wrote an explanation on the Shafiyah of Ibn Hajib, which is one of the best books written on the subject. And really, if you get that book, that's sufficient. If you have the explanation of a Shafiyah from Radi' al-Din, that's enough. Radi' al-Din is alhamdulillah. I mean, he's strong in the language. If I'm not mistaken, he's Rafidi as far as his aqidah is concerned. But the way that he explained al-Kafiyah and the Shafiyah, mashallah, he did a very good job for that. For nothing, for that. I say for that. So Radi' al-Din also wrote an explanation of the Kafiyah of Ibn al-Hajib, which is 5 volumes on the subject of Nahu. It is an amazing book, even though the author was corrupt with his aqidah, which I mentioned here. So yeah, that's sufficient. If you have the explanation of a Shafiyah by Radi' al-Din, that's enough. You don't really need a lot. You'll get explanation of certain abwab and of Sarf in the Al-Kitab by Sibawayh. And because the original science of Nahu, Sarf was included in it. It was later on that they separated the two. So you see even in Alfiyah ibn Malik, that he included the Abwab al-Sarf in his Alfiyah. Because that's the way that the people of Nahu originally, when they put the Nahu together, Sarf was a part of Nahu. It wasn't a separate science. It was later on that people started to take it as a separate science. But it was always included in the books of Nahu. It wasn't included as Nahu, but it was included with the study of Nahu. But then later on, like I said, Muhammad ibn Malik, Al-Imam Muhammad ibn Malik, he did that himself when he wrote Laamiyah al-Af'al. He took Sarf out. He explained it as its own thing. But it's not a major science. It's not something that, like, again, if you have Tasreef al-Uzi, you memorize it, you studied it, you understand it, khalas, you're good to go. Read the explanation, take the shot of Radi' al-Din for the Shafiyah, and you're good to go. Yeah, I mean, they have like one poem where somebody took the Shafiyah by Ibn al-Hajib, and they wrote it out into a poem, which is supposed to be, actually, they said that the poem is actually better than the metan itself, and Allah knows best. And so if you took the poem and memorize, but why would you want to do that? You know how long that poem is? So long, Tasreef al-Uzi, that's sufficient. Read the rest, understand, and keep it moving. Wallahu musta'an. And then inshallah, from the next lesson, inshallah, we'll enter into phase 8. So then we're going to start to get started with poetry, inshallah.